My name is Jay McBride. I was born in Elma, Michigan. I am happily married to my beautiful wife, Vanessa. We've been married for 3 years. I have a 2.5-year-old son, and I'm an aspiring photographer. I retired from the United States Army in 2016. While I was in, I was a United States Army Special Forces Green Beret, and that's where I had my first introduction to photography. So after I retired, I got a job as a government contractor living in Virginia, and I didn't really feel like my job or position was going anywhere. And I'd picked up photography as a hobby, so I just decided to turn my hobby into a potential career. My least favorite editing style probably goes along the lines of my least favorite shooting style, and that's portrait photography and like wedding photography, things like that, where you try to cover things up, where you try to kind of mask things, you try to make them perfect, with phones and everything else. These days everything has a filter on it, everybody looks perfect. In wedding photos, the bride, her dress has to look perfect, her makeup has to look perfect. And in portrait photography, you're trying to make the person look as good as they can by clearing up, their skin and editing little parts here and there, to try to cover that stuff up, and that's really not what I'm about. My short-term goals in photography are to improve my skills, become more formally educated in photography, to grasp bigger concepts. I want to learn more about lighting. I want to learn about the other aspects that go into photography and how they affect pictures and how they're captured. As I develop myself as a photographer, I would like to be able to help other people, specifically the veteran community. I started a company already. It's called Short2, and the concept is to take combat veterans. The idea is to take combat veterans from behind the aperture of a weapon system and put them behind the aperture of a camera. I've found it personally very therapeutic. Photography is one of the few things, other than my 2-year-old, that'll wake me up at 5 in the morning. It'll make me want to get out of bed and go do something. After formal education and just experience getting better in photography, one of the things that I've already started is a company called Short2. My plans for this company is for it to become a nonprofit organization where combat veterans, can find the same type of therapy that I found in photography. I don't feel that the transition is difficult. Going from a combat veteran who's used to being behind the glass of an aperture on a weapon system, it's not so different looking through the aperture of a camera, and I found that for myself it's personally satisfying.
See yourself and your photography in the future?
The direction that I want to go with photography is first to improve my skills and gain experience through formal education. One of the things that I've already done and started is a company called Short2, which I plan on turning into a nonprofit organization where we take combat veterans from behind the lens of a scope on a rifle to behind the aperture of a lens on a camera. One of the things that I found personally with photography is that it's one of the few things, other than my 2-year-old, that'll get me out of bed at 4 or 5 in the morning to go capture a sunrise or something like that. When I was discharged, I was diagnosed with PTSD, traumatic brain injury. I had a substance abuse problem. Had a whole lot of things that were going on that I'm not proud of, but I'm glad that I had to go through, because it made me who I am today. But even during that time, I would make time for photography. It's one of the few things that it's one of the few things that would kind of pull me out of my haze that I was in. And when I saw what photography was doing to me, and I started to really analyze why this one thing would pull me out of my funk where other things wouldn't, is because it was one of the few things in my life that I had the freedom of my own creativity. I could control what I was doing with that. With everything else that I felt out of control with, it's something that I could manage. That's not really it either. That's not the word control. Photography gave me a feeling of fulfillment that I wasn't finding, in other places in my life since I had retired and left the community that I'd been with my entire adult life. And that was something that I was able to, carry over into my civilian life. And after I'd quit drinking and became sober and really trying to just figure out what I was actually doing with my life after I retired, photography really became a huge influence on how I started my new life. It's almost the foundation of what I'm doing right now in my life. It tells a good story of, I think, who I am and where I'm going. Just like my development of photography in the beginning was, rough around the edges. You could tell I didn't really know where I was going or what I was doing. I knew where I wanted to go, but I didn't really know what I was doing with it yet. And as I progressed, that's kind of how I see my life now. Getting away from the government sector, I quit a really good paying job to pursue something that I love and something that I care about, because there isn't any amount of money that can buy you happiness. I want to spend more time with my family, with my wife. I want to spend more time with my son. I want to spend more time at home. I don't mind traveling for work, but not, for 6 months at a time. I already missed my son's first steps, and photography gives me an opportunity to be home and around my family a lot more than I was before. And hopefully in the future I'll make a little bit of money. One of my biggest regrets throughout my career is that I didn't take any pictures anywhere I went. My entire military career, I went to some awesome places, did some amazing things, and never took pictures. And now that I have a family with photography and pursuing that as a career path, not only do I have time to be home with my family, I also have an ability to capture the moments with my family. And that's what my life revolves around now, is my family. That's the single most important thing to me.